Good evening, and thanks for joining me on this talk on strategic management. Thank you for joining me. My name is Aaron Mund, and I'd like to just start off by telling you what we're going to be doing here and what we're talking about. So, going to cover strategic management and all of its parts. Starts with the formation of the strategy execution, and then there's scanning and adjusting course. So, what is strategic management? So I have a couple definitions here, and to start, we have Investopedia that says strategic management is the management of an organization's resources to achieve its goals and objectives. Next, we have Business Dictionary, which says the systematic analysis of the factors associated with a customer's and competitors, aka external environment, and the organization itself, the internal environment, to provide the basis for maintaining optimum management practices. The objectives of strategic management is to achieve better alignment of corporate policies and strategic priorities. So these are just two definitions. What are your definitions, or what is your definition based on your experience, based on what you may have learned? What is your definition of strategic management? So with strategic management, it's not just one thing that a manager does. It's not just one step. There's a lot of different moving parts with the overall strategy, and making sure that everything gets put in place and making sure that it's successful. A good strategic manager or group of managers will determine the success of the strategy. And to start with the strategy formation, what managers should do is identify the target customer. So we're not going to be selling a product to everyone. It's only going to go to a certain group of customers, and that's who you want to hone in on. You don't need to be selling the newest skateboard to somebody who's never ridden a skateboard. So you want to think about those factors and what comes into place. So it's thinking about that target customer. That's really important. And so then with this, you'll also want to think about what it is that your firm does well and why do people want it. So with that, it's not just necessarily somebody just being like, oh, this is the latest and greatest thing, or it's the best mousetrap. You got to think about what it is that you provide. That's that core competency that you really provide to the customers. And once you know that, then there's a few different ways that a company can focus in on their strategy development. So first is by doing something new. Now with this, you may think, oh, producing that latest and greatest app, maybe the best website, the newest way of doing things, that sort of thing. Yes, and partially no. So with this, it's looking at that value chain of the industry. So when prepping for this, I was thinking about different companies that have really kind of changed the value chain and added value at different parts. So think about Uber. We had taxis. We were able to get a taxi, but now you can go on your phone and you can get a taxi or a ride within a few minutes. You can watch where it is. So it's not necessarily that part of getting you from point A to point B. It's that how do you get that car from wherever it is to point A? So they looked at that value chain and then innovated in that way. So the next, we have building on what you already do well. So there's some companies that do something very well and it works well in another area. Say maybe a finance company who works in investing, maybe they could do well in banking. Or maybe there's some other aspect that your company does well that would transition well over into a different line of business, but still maintains its integrity to your core business. So the next one would be reacting opportunistically to emerging opportunities. And so what this relies upon is having the tools, the resources, the strategies, the competitive advantages as kind of a portfolio of options that then can lead to a successful strategy formation. So there may not be one thing that works well right now, but you have it as part of your business and it may be ready to go in 2 years. You got to be ready for that if there's something that your company does well and something happens where you're like, we got to act on this. We have this business unit that's well for this. Let's act. So then with this and knowing these strategies or ways to develop a strategy rather, which of these do you think would be best in a competitive industry like advertising or app development? So just use your own experience. What do you think would be best? So then next we get into strategy execution. So with this execution phase, there's going to be many factors and things that come into place. And you're going to have to look at the people, getting the people on board. That can be the employees, the customers, the suppliers, and maybe there's some other stakeholders that you need to take into account. You got to get them on board in getting this strategy executed. And how does that look? You know, maybe something that may be different for one business over another business. How does that look for your business? So think about that. And then we get into this part of developing the strategy and getting it ready to go to market. And this is going to require a continuous improvement mindset when developing this. So if you have an idea at point A, when you're getting this thing launched, it's probably going to change 3 months down the road and then 6 months and then a year down the road. So you got to be ready for that. You got to be prepared to adjust and modify the strategy. If you're not, probably going to fail. So be ready for those adjustments. Be ready to make those changes. And so that kind of alludes to the next part of scanning and adjusting course. So as this strategy is being developed and as it's going on, this could take 5, 10 years for the overall strategy to go into place. You got to be scanning the environment continuously, both internally and externally, and looking for those opportunities. Our marketplace is changing all the time. Who knew 5, 10, 15 years ago that a web-based bookstore would be in the grocery business? But here we are. So you got to be watching for that. So what do you think are important factors when you're scanning the marketplace? What would you look for as something that's important? And then now that we've covered the strategy formation, the execution, just want to close out here today. So there's been a lot that we've talked about. And so again, just kind of want to recap what we talked about here today. So we went over how to formulate the strategy. What needs to go into that? What do you need to look for? Then there's the strategy execution, bringing people on board, getting those stakeholders to buy into whatever you're doing. And then there's scanning and adjusting course. And so you're going to be looking around and thinking about what we need to do next. We've done X, now what's X plus 2019 look like or 2020 look like? So hopefully this was helpful this evening. Hopefully you found it informative. And I look forward to reading about your questions and hope you have a great rest of your evening.